So here I have my piece of hemp rope. This happens to be 3-stranded hemp rope. You can use 4-stranded. This same technique will work with 4 strands. We're going to be working with creating the knot in this first little piece of the rope. Maybe this is 1/4-inch rope, so maybe 8 inches of rope, 6 inches of rope. I'm going to use a little bit more so you can see it a little more easily. You don't need to use up as much rope as I'm going to. So in order to make sure that the knot has a nice tight weave, I'm going to put a backstop right here. I'm going to wrap a piece of tape around that. So now I've added my backstop knot. I'm going to start tying my first wall knot there, then add another one, then add another one as I go. Now I'm going to unlay this rope, which means undoing the strands, letting them twist apart. Like that. All the way down to my tape. So now I have my 3 separate strands, and I'm going to add a piece of tape to each of the top of these so that they don't come unraveled. I'm going to use different colored tape so that you can see what's going on as I tie the rest of this knot. So there you have it. Now I have all 3 strands taped off with different colors. Strand 1 is tan, strand 2 is purple, and strand 3 is blue. Now when you're tying a wall knot, it's actually easiest to see this if you're looking straight down at the knot from above instead of from the side like we traditionally do. So here is now strand 1, strand 2, and strand 3. Now the first thing I'm going to do is I take strand 1 and I'm going to tuck it under strand 2 like that, and I'm going to protect the loop that I've just created there just by sticking my thumb up through it a little bit. Now I'm going to take strand 2 and I'm going to tuck it underneath strand 1 and strand 3 like that. And then I'm going to take strand 3 and run it underneath strand 2 and then up through that little hole that I'd protected with my thumb. I'm going to adjust this a little bit so it's easier to see what's happening. And there you have that 3-part weave. And now I'm just going to pull each of these strands kind of in turn, tightening it up a little bit at a time, so it gets evenly tightened. And I'm tightening it up toward, I'm grabbing the end here and pulling one end, pulling it against, and pulling it against like that. And now that it's relatively tight, we can show it to you from the side. And I've been tightening it up toward where this tape is. So now that it's there, I'm going to keep doing the same thing. I'm just going around and I'm tightening each one in turn so that they're evenly tightened all the way around like that. Once you have it at that stage, now pull the strands. These all have about even tension from the center line here. Now hold them all together and kind of pull them really hard. Maybe jerk them a little bit. This pulls them more toward the center of that knot, kind of collapsing them down toward the core. So there we are. Here's the first wall knot. And you can see it makes a really kind of nice stopper there. It's attractive. It's got a nice pretty weave. Some people leave it just like this. Maybe they'll separate these strands a little bit. They'll put a drop of thread lock, a drop of super glue, kind of in the middle there, soak the middle of that knot so the knot stays good and solid and they know it's not going to come unwoven. And then they cut it off maybe 3/4 of an inch, 1.5 centimeters, maybe an inch, so that they have a little bit of a tassel at the end, and then they just leave it like that. I happen to like putting 3 of these in a row just because I like the look of it. So that's what I'm going to continue to do now. And all I'm going to do is I'm just going to face this thing straight up again, just like I did a moment ago. And I'm going to do exactly the same thing, going the same direction that I went last time. Last time I started doing my weaves kind of counterclockwise, so I'm going to do exactly the same thing this time. If you happen to have gone clockwise, then go clockwise. It's fine. Same thing. Put the first strand under the second strand. Take the second strand, stick it underneath the first strand and the second strand, and then the first strand and the third strand. Then take the third strand underneath that second strand and up through your original hole, like that. Same pattern, same technique, kind of weaving them all down. When you're using 2 hands instead of kind of holding it like I'm holding it here, it actually goes a little faster. But I'm doing exactly the same thing. I'm just going around in a circle. I'm tightening each one in turn so that it fits nicely and snugly against its predecessor, like that. And this is the technique I usually use. You just kind of pull it like that. And it's getting nice and tight against the previous one. You could see these weaves go the same direction. And again, the same thing. Once you get it tight against the previous knot, hold the whole thing together. Pull it against that middle. Like that. There we go. Pull them against each other. And that's the second one. And again, you could stop here if you like the look of that. You could choose to lock it off in the middle or not. When you have rope with good tooth like hemp or something that's natural fiber, sometimes people don't bother doing that. Purists usually won't bother locking it off. But if you have slippery rope like nylon, polypro, something like that, and you're trying to do the same trick, it's just not going to hold unless you put a drop of something in there to lock it off. So there's 2 wall knots. I'm going to add one more. Same kind of thing. Separate my strands. First strand underneath the second strand. Second strand underneath the first strand and the third strand. And then the third strand underneath the second strand and up through the original hole. So I was just showing you a different way of holding those ropes while you were doing that. That way works just as well. And then tighten it up in turn and in sequence. We have 3 wall knots stacked right up against each other. I happen to like the look of that one. So you can pull off your tape and you can trim your ends. Now when you're trimming your ends, I usually like to leave about 3/4 of an inch, 1.5 centimeters, maybe a full inch, right around like that. And then I'll actually unwind the remainder of this rope. So I'm unlaying the individual strands now to get back to the individual strings, like that. Because when you do that, then it tends to have sort of more tassel-y kind of appearance. So there you go. Completed triple wall knot.